Today I wanted to discuss A Blaze in the Northern Sky by Darkthrone. I'm by no means an expert on this music, and I'm not even playing Darkthrone music out loud right now because I found it to be way too aggressive to speak over. I'm not an expert on black metal. I'm not an expert on Darkthrone. I'm not an expert on music. I have no credibility whatsoever, but I enjoy music. I like listening to it, and I like particularly reading the Darkthrone lyrics. So I wanted to make a video today reading aloud some lyrics and sharing my thoughts that come to mind, as I find that it could possibly be a good exercise for myself in forming thoughts straight off the dome in conversation with these rather intense lyrics that I feel drawn to in a way that I don't really understand. I don't feel as though I went looking for Darkthrone. I don't feel as though I went looking for this music. I am drawn to it. And that's all I can really say. I lay enshrined, contaminated time warp. My flesh yearns for the tomb world. Those are the opening lines of the third album, the third song, Paragon Belial. My understanding of the word Belial is that it means devil. And my understanding of the word paragon, actually, I don't even. Right now, I'm like blanking. I don't even know what to think of the word paragon, and I can admit that. Belial, I've looked up in the past because I wanted to know what it meant, and I believe it's an old Hebrew word, but still, I could be wrong. Laying enshrined in a contaminated time warp is how I would imagine these words. What is in a contaminated time warp? Contaminated means disease. Diseased. What is a time warp? My experience in my life of a time warp has been forgetting time. When I'm following time, there is a sense of something that is linear and something that is measured. And when it's contaminated, if it were to be contaminated, or if it were to be warped, that makes me think of losing track. So losing track by disease, laying enshrined by this disease, lost in time. My flesh, all this, yearns for the tomb world. Dare I say where I shall lay this body to rest. So there's kind of a desire for death in these opening statements. Let's move on. My soul like layers of frost, simulating a specter shadow. Frozen in time and space, I was hacked out of ice. Now this is where things start to get a little crazy. And by crazy, I mean I borderline fantastical. No, fantastical is not the word, but I mean fantasy in the sense that that when we're that in this situation where we're dreaming of death, we we start to see our bodies and ourselves maybe as it's hard because it's are we thinking of ourselves more of truly what we are, stepping outside of what we're conditioned to always think of ourselves, or are we you know romanticizing or maybe um, using our imaginations beyond what reality brings us. Let's go deeper into each word, and I feel like I might be able to get somewhere. My soul like layers of frost. Of course, at this point, I feel like we're crossing over the threshold of our body living and our body dying, or you know, how I imagine it, the soul leaving the body. So when we die, our bodies are cold, simulating a specter shadow. That really, to me, brings forth an idea of um, either a shadow of death, like a shadow being a way of depicting death, or the shadow could be an image of our soul leaving our body, leaving the body as material, and the shadow being what releases to either, to the afterlife, to the other dimension, the next dimension, however you see it. For me, I don't even know. I have thought about death sometimes. I mean, it's I have an inclination that this consciousness, ends and there's nothing, but also I have other inclinations that involve reincarnation, that also involve kind of a repetition, or that this consciousness is the only thing that this consciousness can know. And if that were the case, is it possible that we repeat everything over and over and over again? I don't know. Frozen in time and space. I'm reading from the lyrics sheet now. Frozen in time and space, I was hacked out of ice. Okay, so maybe, from the lyricist's point of view, he is perhaps being reborn, or he is still dead, and it's just the body that's being hacked out of ice, or is he born out of ice? Frozen in time and space implies to me that he has been frozen by this yearning for death, frozen by death after contamination of either the desire for death or just death itself. I do like the images that come to mind of ice and frost, because as I mentioned fantasy before, we start to get environmental, and I feel like that for me is I enjoy utilizing my imagination when it comes to listening to art. I mean, listening to music or looking at art, and I can really picture an Arctic landscape that breeds some level of an acceptance of death, or I mean, death is in the air in an Arctic landscape. Not that I've spent any time in an Arctic landscape, but it's how I imagine it. I recently actually watched this movie, this documentary about, it was in Antarctica, and it was a documentary about researchers that live there. And something that stayed with me after watching this movie was the scientists described walking on the snow or in the snow as being so quiet that other than your footsteps, the loudest thing that you hear out there is your own heartbeat. Something about that image has just stayed with me since watching the movie a couple weeks ago, and when I read these lyrics, that's where I go visually. Let's keep going. Faded am I behind a wall of consciousness, still feeling a different world. Faded am I behind a wall of consciousness, still feeling a different world. So I feel like from the beginning of these lyrics, the lyricist is separating his soul from his body. And by doing so, his perception of death has changed. It becomes something that he yearns for. It becomes something that has, faded. He says he is faded behind his wall of consciousness. So he's alluding to something behind, or that's how I'm envisioning it, behind consciousness, deeper in here. So if this was my consciousness, what's here? Is this what's behind my consciousness? Ancestral experiences, I imagine. What the root of our consciousness, which for me, that's not something that I know much about, but it's something I've wondered about probably my whole life. Still feeling a different world surrounding me. Chilling voices fill my head. I open my eyes. Alright, these lyrics right here, they just kind of emphasize what I just talked about, which is like, what is beyond our consciousness? What is beyond our ability to have thoughts? At this point, we've forgotten about the body. The body is dead, and now it's almost like, as right now, me, a person here, my body is the most outer part of myself. We've shed that. Now we're in here. We're deeper inside of me. It's my consciousness. They're my thoughts. Okay. It's how I'm perceiving things. It's how I'm understanding everything. He's saying, let's take another step back. What's behind that? Chilling voices that fill his head. They open his eyes maybe, or he opens his eyes from these chilling voices. Who are these voices? It's beyond death at this point, I would say. I feel like it's beyond ancestral connections. I've experienced sleep paralysis, and that involved like dark figures that stood over my bed, and something about them. I've had other experiences too, but something about that experience, like, really made me think about, like, it kind of defined how I think of an entity, or how I imagine what an entity is. Something that's not a deity, not a god, not a demon, not an angel, but something kind of beyond that, or maybe not beyond, but like in between those things, something that is less defined, something that I could not understand, but I have had, you know, experiences that kind of alluded to these entities, and that's what I think of there. Let's keep going. Oh, I opened my eyes. I'm reading back on the lyrics sheet. The boiling sea beneath the castle of Faust. See, this is where we get a little more esoteric, because I don't know what the castle of Faust is, and I don't. And then it says, Belial finally comes forth. So, I mean, an image of the devil coming out from beneath the boiling sea. The castle of Faust, I mean, now I can just picture, I mean, I think of how I've seen, you know, ancient castles, or, you know, Minas Morgul from Lord of the Rings, like a extremely sharp pointed castle that kind of yawns. Its windows kind of like yawn, and it's like, you know, it gives off something evil, something scary. I mean, maybe we've seen that. I mean, I haven't spent much time in Europe. I'm American, and although I do live on the East Coast, things aren't old like that. So I remember being in France and going to a church that the architecture like moved me in a way that nothing had really done before, in a way. So that's how I imagine this castle and a boiling sea. Obviously, I mean, it's in my head. Immediately it's red, but maybe it's not red. Maybe it's just pure boiling, you know, impossible to perceive, impossible to get close to. The devil comes forth. Now, moving on, it seems like the next stanza is like in quotes, and it says, "The ancient white light writings were just lying men and their pens. You are the same, only in black. Return with the knowledge of making your own God." Now, again, I'm not an expert in anything, so this could be from something, and I just don't know. I didn't do the research. That's not really what this video is about. It's not about knowing. It's about my initial thoughts towards something that I'm drawn, these lyrics that I'm drawn to. So, the ancient white light writings were just lying men and their pens. It makes me think of religion, and it makes me think of maybe like sacred texts, and maybe this person's perception of sacred texts as being lying, like being lies. You are the same, only in black. Return with the knowledge of making your own God. Now, I could be missing the mark here, but my instincts just go straight towards an understanding of the devil being equal to God, and that yes, only in black. Return with the knowledge of making your own God. There is kind of something liberating in these lyrics, even though they're like pure evil, but to embrace what is coming forth, and that being the devil out of a boiling sea. So I feel like there's some kind of embrace with this darkness that that the lyricist is connecting with. I want to keep going, because we're almost to the end, and I'm really intrigued by the next line. Dream king of the tomb world, I enter into an eternal oath, creating my paragon, Belial. Dream king of the tomb world. I love that line. because it's like this king or these entities kind of like step forward in my mind, and they're back here, and they're maybe in the shadows. Maybe I don't know them. I mean, I still don't know them. I don't think I ever really truly will, but they step forth, and I enter into an eternal oath, creating my Paragon Belial. Now, I feel this, it's like an connectedness, I feel like, is being described. That's like, when I most often think about interconnectedness, I think about nature and I think about tranquility, but I feel like what we're getting at here is beyond that maybe more obvious depiction of interconnectedness, like when you are in nature and there is a darkness there's a darkness in nature. It's all balanced. So but this is so much into the dark side of it. It almost like promotes the dark side of, I was going to say this life, but really this is not about this life. This is about something more than that, and something that's beyond this life. Something that's hard to get at. I mean, that's why I'm making this video, I guess, because it's like, what is beyond this life? I mean, when you ask yourself that question, what is beyond this consciousness? What is beyond, my consciousness? Can I step back from it? Can I understand what's behind the curtain, kind of thing? It's like, the more you just kind of sit with that and ask yourself that, like, you do start to, in your own way, like, develop a way of understanding that. And it still might, it still could all be, a farce, because it's like it's taking everything that's back there and it's pushing it, it's kind of pulling it, more pulling it than pushing it, pulling it into the frame of my consciousness. And then because it's still, I can only exist here, I start to, form it into recognizable shapes, like these entities being dark figures, as this like devil, this depiction of the devil with a castle and a boiling sea. It's like, it's an interesting take or way to describe our impulse to understand things. And I feel like what I enjoy about this music or these words is that it's highlighting, like, maybe it's highlighting a fascination, a desire to do that, not only rooted in tranquility, but also darkness. So those are my thoughts on Paragon Belial. Again, I'm not an expert, and you can roast me any way you want. I'm not really worried about. I'm not worried about my own credibility. I just wanted to kind of use this as an opportunity to, I don't know, just get thinking about these lyrics and something that I'm drawn to that I don't understand. All right.